Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Transforming Basic Needs Supports in California Higher Education. My name is Miguel Leon, Senior Program Manager at the Michelson 20MM Foundation. While we give folks a couple of minutes to hop on, I'd like to share a little bit about our foundation. Founded by Dr. Gary K. Michelson and Alia Michelson in 2010, the Michelson 20MM Foundation believes that equitable educational and economic opportunities are essential to activating humanity's full potential. For over a decade, it has served 20 million minds, the approximate number of post-secondary students in the US, by advancing open educational resources, smart justice, digital equity, and intellectual property education. Recognizing the need for change at scale, Michelson 20MM also invests in tech entrepreneurs, change makers, and policy to catalyze scalable innovations in the knowledge economy and accelerate progress toward a more just world. Today, the Michelson 20MM Foundation is proud to partner with the Center for Equitable Higher Education to bring you an extremely important and timely conversation about the historic opportunity higher education leaders have to transform basic needs supports for our most vulnerable college students. We find ourselves at a historic moment in post-secondary education. 10 years ago, conversations around the real cost of college or movements to support student basic needs didn't exist. Thanks to many of you, this has changed. You've helped uplift the voices of students from campuses throughout the state to the halls of our state capitol. Finally, their voices have been heard and acted upon. The groundswell around this issue is truly a testament to the hard work and dedication of many of you in our audience and many of the speakers that you'll hear from today. Who would have imagined that the state of California would allocate millions of dollars in its budget to support student mental health, address food insecurity, provide emergency student aid, and hire staff whose job will be to ensure that students receive the resources they need to persist and graduate. These are significant strides, but we all know that good policy is followed by even better implementation. That's what today's conversation is about. It's about not relenting and about accountability. Dr. Rashida Crutchfield and Dr. Jen Mcguire from the Center for Equitable Higher Education, with input from many of you, have compiled recommendations for how higher education leaders can effectively spend the influx of dollars coming their way. We encourage you to take these recommendations to your campus leaders and demand that they implement them at your school. Please continue the fight for our most vulnerable students. Your leadership is needed now more than ever. And let us know your thoughts today. You'll be able to ask questions via the Zoom Q&A function, and we'll be fielding questions in real time for our panel, so please chime in. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to our keynote speaker. Assemblymember Mark Berman proudly represents California's 24th district, which includes southern San Mateo County and northern Santa Clara County, spanning from the heart of the Silicon Valley over the hill to the beautiful coast side. A longtime champion for students, major provisions of his legislative work are the foundations of the state's investments in student basic needs centers and coordinators. Assemblymember Berman, thank you for your leadership and welcome to our event.
Well, thank you so much, Miguel, for that introduction, and to the Michelson Foundation for hosting this event. I'm Assemblymember Mark Berman, and I'm honored and excited to open today's webinar focused on how new funding can be used in transformative ways to support students struggling to meet their basic needs. Thank you, everyone, for attending and showing your commitment to this critical issue and to the work that you're doing day in and day out to support our students. I'm grateful to the organizers and speakers for bringing us all together during this historic opportunity to improve the lives of our most vulnerable students. And I'd just like to briefly share a little bit about how I got involved in my work to address students' basic needs and security. I've had the privilege of championing students' basic needs for the last 3 years in the California legislature. I first learned about the scale of basic needs challenges by hearing directly from students who shared their very personal experiences with me and my colleagues. As chair of the Select Committee on the Master Plan for Higher Education, I held 5 hearings across California, and a constant theme during every hearing was students talking about their struggles with homelessness, food insecurity, and lack of access to health and mental health services. Focusing on basic needs is so important for students because it's about survival. Students are having to ask themselves, do I pay rent this month or do I buy textbooks for my classes? Should I take an extra shift at work to afford groceries or should I attend class? If students are worried where they'll sleep that night or where their next meal will come from, how can they be expected to succeed academically, meet their educational goals, and reap the benefits of a higher education? The harsh reality is that California college students are facing food insecurity and housing insecurity, including homelessness, at staggering and alarming rates. And once I learned about some of these rates, it couldn't be anything but a call to action to help. My first basic needs bill, AB 302, would have required community colleges to provide a safe parking lot on campus for their homeless students to sleep in their vehicles at night. I introduced AB 302 after my former district office intern told me her friend's experience with homelessness and trying to find a safe place to sleep in his car for almost 2 years here in my district, practically in my backyard. While AB 302 did not ultimately become law, it was very successful in shining a spotlight on the basic needs of students. In fact, Long Beach City College recently established a safe parking program on their campus to address the immediate needs of their homeless students. After this experience, I was more determined than ever and came across a book called Addressing Homelessness and Housing Insecurity in Higher Education: Strategies for Educational Leaders. It probably won't surprise all of you to learn that 2 of the authors of this book are Dr. Crutchfield and Dr. Mcguire, who will be sharing their insights and recommendations with us soon. I'm so grateful for their research, which is informed by the student experience. Their book was the inspiration for my legislation over the last 2 years, which focused on creating a single point of contact tasked with overseeing existing basic needs services and resources. I don't read a lot of books. I read a lot of articles. I read a lot of things people send me, but I don't read a lot of books. But I read this one front to back and actually highlighted it. I felt like I was back in law school, highlighting the passages and taking notes in the borders. And I actually bought a copy of their book for the governor's staff to help persuade them of the merits of the proposals that I then introduced. Students have expressed that campuses often have fragmented systems that are difficult to navigate with no single point of contact. Housing and food insecurity programming should work collaboratively, and students needing one service should be given information about the other basic needs services that are available. This is why in 2020, and then again this past year in 2021, I introduced legislation to provide a coordinated and integrated approach to address students' basic needs by establishing a basic needs center and hiring a basic needs coordinator on every community college campus in California. A centralized and coordinated effort that is adequately staffed is an essential component of an effective basic needs strategy. A basic needs center and coordinator will provide that single point of contact for community college students to more easily access, gain awareness of, and be connected to basic needs services and resources. This also provides the opportunity to leverage additional benefits, including federal financial aid, CalFresh benefits, Medi-Cal, and community-based resources. Some community colleges are already moving in the direction of a more coordinated and integrated approach. And earlier this year, the Chancellor's office reported that about 59 community colleges, about half, already have some form of basic needs center on campus. For basic needs supports to be sustainable, including hiring a basic needs coordinator, ongoing funding was absolutely necessary. Moreover, basic needs insecurity is an ongoing issue, which calls for ongoing funding to ensure equitable access statewide. Along with advocacy from the Student Senate for California Community Colleges, Young Invincibles, and John Burton Advocates for Youth, I was proud to champion a budget request for $30 million annually to fund a basic needs center and coordinator at every community college campus. And I was thrilled when this ongoing funding was included in the governor's May revision, and my legislation was incorporated into the budget. This has been a 3-year journey. For me, it's been longer for a lot of you, but it's just beginning. The work is just now gonna really move to the campuses and continue. I commend California's higher education institutions for stepping up to meet the basic needs of their students, such as through food pantries and housing related efforts. And now that we have significant resources, it's critical to make these new investments count. Students are relying on us to get this right. Thank you, everybody, so much. I look forward to hearing the conversation.
Thank you, Assemblymember Berman. We are grateful to you for your presence today and for all you do in support of California students. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Rashida Crutchfield and Dr. Jen Mcguire from the Center for Equitable Higher Education. Dr. Jen Mcguire is an associate professor of social work at Humboldt State University. She's a passionate action researcher and policy advocate that channels her lived experience as a student struggling to meet her basic needs into her work, especially her teaching. She was co-principal investigator for the CSU study of student basic needs and helped launch HSU OSNAP, Humboldt State's comprehensive system of support for students in need. Dr. Mcguire's teaching and research has led to actionable policies, projects, and programs that positively influence CSU students, all work that resulted in her receiving a CSU Faculty Innovation and Leadership Award for her commitment to student success. Welcome, Dr. Mcguire. We're happy to have you. We're happy to have you with us today. Also with us today is Dr. Rashida Crutchfield, Associate Professor in the School of Social Work at California State University, Long Beach. Along with Dr. Mcguire, Dr. Crutchfield leads the newly founded Center for Equitable Higher Education, which is dedicated to studying and promoting economic, food, and housing justice. She is an advocate who is committed to amplifying the voices of marginalized communities through research and service. Dr. Crutchfield was principal investigator for the California State University Office of the Chancellor's study on food and housing security. Her work has been instrumental in the development of programs and services for students experiencing housing and food insecurity at all 23 CSU campuses, and her continued research and advocacy on basic needs for students has garnered statewide and national attention. Dr. Crutchfield, Dr. Mcguire, welcome. The mic is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Miguel and 20MM for that introduction and for bringing us together for this important conversation. And Assemblymember Berman for your leadership in this work. And frankly, Jen and I both are doing fangirl dances. So we're really happy and pleased to hear from all of you. Jen and I are directors of 2 centers, both named the Center for Equitable Higher Education, North and South, one located at California State University, Long Beach, and the other at Humboldt State. Our work is focused on studying the experience and evaluating practice to ground this progress that we're making toward economic, food, and housing justice for our students. I am incredibly honored to greet everyone in this space. We have a dynamic audience, and I want to acknowledge that lots of you come to us from differing perspectives. Clearly, we have policymakers and advocates, some of whom have turned the dial on instituting change for our students, and others who are new to the conversation. We have administrative leadership in higher ed and community-based agencies that have set the context for and provided leadership for our work. We have our basic needs folks, our family, who've been championing this work and are working with our students day in and day out. And most importantly, these recommendations that we're presenting and the reason that we're here are grounded in our students. Research for our students and our students themselves who've committed to their own progress and have held us accountable to continue to show our commitment to education through our mission and really to support our work in basic needs. So we're here today because the California legislature, through leadership from Assemblymember Berman and others like him, allocated one-time and first-time funds to address basic needs. Those of us who've been in this work for a long time have been piecing together our efforts with spit and duct tape, frankly, really combining all of our resourcefulness and available resources to gather this work. But often in that effort to pull together as best we could, this often prompted a mentality of scarcity. And now we have this opportunity with ongoing funds to move with robust intention to be innovative, forward-thinking, and sustainable.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for that warm-up and welcoming everyone to this space. I echo the words of Rashida and everyone here today. It's an honor to be here among those who can provide us with expert guidance towards moving this research informed recommendations to transformative institutionalized change with these new ongoing funds. It has been a long road getting here. Programs for students facing basic needs insecurity are essential, as we know, for student health, continued enrollment, degree completion, and ultimately securing living wage jobs for graduates. Programs often are and should be informed by research because there are real positive impacts, like more money for paying for food and housing and utilities, and the time to enroll in more classes and graduate sooner. In the recommendations, we share 8 things to avoid when working towards transformative changes, and I'm going to highlight 4 of them. First, avoid small scale and short-term thinking. COVID has created unprecedented hardship, especially in low-income communities and communities of color. Campuses change strategies to stretch our capacity to support students, and we have the opportunity now to continue to be transformative. Students need big transformative support, and it's imperative that campus leaders balance student short-term needs with the expectation to build infrastructure that will ensure the sustainability of programs and services to support future students. Second, avoid recreating ineffective systems. So we don't need to recreate a charity system in higher education that replicates inequities embedded in historical approaches to addressing poverty. Some of those systems are broken, and we need to do better, and we have the opportunity to do better now. So last, what I'm going to highlight here today is a really important one, and this is about avoiding loan requirements for students. We shouldn't saddle students with additional unnecessary debt as a requirement for seeking financial support when they are in need. Campus leaders should avoid policies that require students to take out maximum loans before they can access services. High need students are loan averse and highly unlikely to accept support that is conditioned on taking out loans.
So we're happy to provide 8 recommendations that are based in our research, both for thinking and framing our progress in this work, but also to frame this conversation that we're having together. So first of all of our campuses have single points of contact, but our ongoing funds must expand and optimize our campus resource hubs for a coordinated approach. Ideally, this is a space on campus, but most importantly, this is staff who can respond to students efficiently in a trauma-informed way, providing key basic needs resources and facilitating access across campus and off campus. This really requires students to avoid sharing their story more than once, and really includes building strong relationships with financial aid, housing, equity-based programs, counseling, health centers, and many others to really facilitate that process through all of our campus community. Number 2, so fundamentally, building affordable housing is key, and the CSU and California community colleges have particular leverage and resource to do this now. Beyond this, housing navigators like the one modeled at Humboldt State by Shante Cat can bridge links to trustworthy off-campus landlords and support students' development in knowing their rights and becoming good neighbors. Research is clear that people of color, our LGBTQIA folks, foster and former foster youth and others are most likely to require basic needs support to achieve graduation. Up to this point, many of us have had expansive outreach to our campuses to build community, to ensure that everyone knows that basic needs programs and services are for everyone. And now with our new resources, we have an obligation to have focused outreach that is framed to support achievement rather than need, and is very much focused on our most marginalized students to make sure that the people who need these resources the most have access to them. We also know that we can't be all things to all people. So meaningful partnerships with our county and community-based organizations is required. Funding staff, basic needs staff, to build actionable collaborations to support maintenance and clear outcomes for these collaborations is needed.
Okay, so I will go for the next four. This one, number 5, can be easily, I think it can be easily overlooked at how important it is. And it is really about training faculty and staff in trauma-informed practices. Faculty are the only people really insured to interact with students, with all the students. Many students do not choose to participate in campus services or co-curricular activities, making faculty the only people that are guaranteed to connect with students. So this makes it really important to take advantage of established professional development processes as space to raise awareness about existing resources and basic needs and security for students. Strategies might include embedding information in course syllabi that can point students to basic needs services, preparing faculty to identify red flags for basic needs security. You know, for example, if they're tired or missing class or low test scores, how to engage in those conversations with them about what might be going on outside of class. And then also ensuring that faculty are well-versed in making referrals for basic needs services that are successful. So not only telling students about it, but making sure that they get there. Next is another important recommendation is evaluating existing programs and interventions. So investing in faculty time to ensure that all basic needs programs and services are evaluated in meaningful ways is critical, because programming needs need to be research informed. We know that. Faculty members are already stretched thin at assigning time is the best way to make sure that thoughtful evaluation takes place. So next is implementing creative and destigmatizing campaigns. So there are multiple ways to do this, and one of them is through partnering with EOP and EOPS mentorship programs, centers for teaching and learning, campus clubs, and any other nodes that have the opportunity to improve awareness and access to support and destigmatize basic needs and security programs. So one of the best ways to do this is many students talk through tech. And so using tech to communicate with students through social media, apps, and bot technology. This is where we can do such important information sharing, helping students understand where their access points are, understanding eligibility requirements and how to sign up, letting students know that these programs are there for them. And then also one really important one is reducing stigma for that first bridge, I think, for students to campus resources. Sometimes students who are curious about supports and maybe unsure if they are able to be eligible for them are much more likely to reach out through tech and learn more and learn about programming if they don't have to interact with a person first. And so last, we have to, of course, highlight CalFresh. CalFresh has been hugely successful for students. Students benefit from access to more nutritional foods that lead to increased health and mental health and academic success. Legislative advocates, county and campus leaders have done incredible, and students have done incredible work together to make this possible. for college and university students to access CalFresh. However, there are still so many students with food needs who are either not eligible or not accessing CalFresh, and we need to continue to expand eligibility and engagement strategies for application assistance. Okay, those are our recs in short. So next, we are going to turn it over to our phenomenal panel, who is going to provide those of us interested in learning more about how to transition these recs to action is possible. So it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Vivian Hernandez. She is a third-year graduate student at California State University, Long Beach in the Master's of Science in Counseling. She is a student, the Master's of Science in Counseling and Student Development in Higher Education. And she also currently serves as the Beach CalFresh Outreach Coordinator for CSU LB Basic Needs Department. She values providing a culture of compassionate care and service and to connecting students with basic needs resources. Take it away, Vivian.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Crutchfield and Dr. Mcguire, for introducing me and for this invitation to be in this space. I would like to thank and extend my sincere gratitude to the Michelson 20MN Foundation and to the Center for Equitable Higher Education for developing and hosting this transformative webinar, where we can join in community with our amazing panelists and bring you all who have joined with critical recommendations on how to ensure that you are really using these new investments to the greatest likelihood that these will really become meaningful improvements in the lives of students and intentionally contributing to student success outcomes. I have the honor and pleasure to support moderating this conversation, and I will begin to introduce our inspiring panelists. To begin, I'll start with Ruben Canedo. Ruben Canedo is the Director for Strategic Equity Initiatives at the Centers for Educational Equity and Excellence and the Basic Needs Committee Chair at UC Berkeley. His responsibilities include college students' basic needs, strategic planning, and mobilization. His efforts focus on research, prevention, sustainability, advocacy, and have helped inform both state and federal policies. Additionally, Ruben facilitates keynotes and trainings on healing, life journeys, and maximizing performance. Welcome, Ruben. Next, we have Colleen Gainley, serves as a program specialist at the California Community College at the Chancellor's Office. In her current position, Ms. Gainley works to increase access to health, mental health, food and housing resources, and other unmet basic needs for students in the California Community College system. Ms. Gainley also supports statewide foster youth success initiatives and the Next Up program. Prior to joining the Chancellor's Office, Ms. Gainley worked at the Foundation for California Community College, the nonprofit that supports the Chancellor's Office. During her 12-year tenure with the foundation, she developed and implemented multiple statewide initiatives designed to support at-risk students. Welcome, Colleen. We next have Enoch Besallo. Serves as a Basic Needs Initiative Manager at the CSU Office of the Chancellor. In this role, he works closely with the 23 campuses of the CSU as programs and services are created and delivered to support students experiencing food and housing insecurity. Enoch has provided leadership and support for the Intersegmental California Higher Education Basic Needs Alliance, also known as CHEVNA, and also serves on the Governor Newsom's Intersegmental Committee on Students' Basic Needs. Prior to his current role, Enoch served as the inaugural director of the Dreams Resource Center at Cal State LA. He is a proud product of the California State University system, having earned his Bachelor's of Arts degree in English from Cal State Fullerton and his Master of Science degree in the higher post-education system from Syracuse University. Welcome, Enoch. We next have Davy Rocher. Serves as the Director of Education at John Burton Advocates for Youth. In this role, she provides leadership and strategic visioning for J-Bay's education. She works in this education and leads the agency's policy efforts designed to improve post-secondary educational outcomes for foster youth and students experiencing homelessness. Ms. Rocher has worked in the social services field for over 25 years, including extensive work in developing solutions to homelessness. These are our amazing and inspiring panelists. If you all would like to go ahead and turn on your cameras to begin. Now, it is time to discuss our panel. It is time to go big and think in more transformative ways and really think about how we're going to end basic needs and securities for college students, and really think about implementing institutionalizing long-term support. Panelists, as a friendly reminder, please be mindful of your response time to ensure that we are covering all of the questions that we have designated, and as well those of the audience. We will begin. I believe we have some questions from our audience. I think we'll start off with that, if that's okay with everyone, to ensure that the audience is heard. One question that we do have from the audience is, are you recommending that students not be required to max out loans to access help, or that they shouldn't be asked to take out any loans? Anyone is open to speak on that?
I love that we started with like easy, chill questions that have no federal or state policy implications to them. So, and I like that this person woke up and said, I'm about to submit this anonymously. I'm about that life, y'all. Whoever did this, shout out to you. I hope that we can celebrate you. I'm happy to kick us off just a little bit and pass it on to folks. So my name is Ruben or Ruben, y'all. So honored and grateful to be here with you. A direct response to this question is that, number one, we need to make sure that we are moving towards being in right relationship with our financial aid community. Historically, they've been vilified as they are the reason why students are struggling, as in like they don't want to give students more money so that they can have their basic needs met. And that's simply not true. They are having to abide by federal policies and federal auditing systems that even if somebody like Enoch comes to me and I'm the financial aid advisor and Enoch just tells me, my mother just died, I have 3 siblings, 2 of them are undocumented, 1 of them is disabled, I myself am already working 3 jobs and I'm doing everything possible to get my family to move forward, and there's no way that I'm gonna make it. If that financial aid person uses professional judgment and supports them in one way, and then almost a similar scenario goes to another 2 advisors and they don't do the same thing, they're potentially in harm's way of failing the audit for that institution, and it causes harm to all of the students in that institution. I apologize for being graphic, but it's to that degree that these federal systems are failing us. There needs to be a federal transformative effort that changes federal policies and state policies so that they can be human-centered and that we can take care of students as humans rather than think about a capitalist imagination and that money being what dictates the higher education experience. So I'm excited for us to move in that direction. So I'll say that there. Now, from theory to practice, those right relationships with your financial aid staff, I would encourage them to ask them, what is the professional judgment that can be that you all have been using in this university? And what can we do better so that we can support students? With the limited resources that we have, can we be as progressive as possible? That for certain cases, we not ask them to max out their loans, but maybe if they have used the average amount of loans, do we need to put them further in debt when we know that money is gonna go to keep them housed? We don't. We really do not. So how do we move in that direction and start moving in that direction and advocating for that so that we are centering equity in the way that we are supporting our students? So I would encourage us to prioritize relationships with our financial aid community, that they're seen as advocates and as champion of our students, and that we ask, whatever we did last year, how do we do a little bit better this year? And to let them know that there are institutions right now who have these emergency aid protocols, who ask for students to borrow at average rates or above average or below average without having to take out further loans and go into further debt because their basic needs aren't being met. So I do want to share that to the community here, that is happening, and that as we're moving through federal policy changes, that we can do better and better little by little, just to get us going here. And I'm happy to pass the mic for other folks with strategies in this arena.
Ruben is always really great at getting us going. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us this morning, and thank you to the Michelson Foundation for hosting us. I want to expand upon what Ruben just stated and go a further step by acknowledging that in the recommendations that Dr. Crutchfield and Dr. Mcguire have presented, there's a call to limit and eliminate barriers to accessing basic needs services and programs, right? When we are encouraging students to take out additional loans prior to receiving emergency aid, that is an additional barrier that is adding time, is adding constraints, and to be honest, is a really difficult decision for a lot of our marginalized and underrepresented and first generation students to take. And so we don't want to bring on or place additional barriers when it is not needed. And I say when it is not needed because it is not in the legislative language that students take out loans and max out their loans prior to accessing the programs and services that the great state of California has funded at all of our campuses.
Thank you so much, Ruben and Enoch, for starting us off with that audience question. If anyone else would love to add on to this question, we can allow that space. Okay, thank you so much for that response and really centering how we can be more intentional and really forward thinking to ensure that we can make students humans and ensure that, you know, they're not a dollar sign, and really bring that forward. Thank you so much for that. We'll go ahead and begin with our guided questions that we have brought to all of you to kind of discuss further. So the first question is, how can college and state leaders be inclusive of their spending to ensure that all students have an equitable opportunity to be supported by basic needs? Let's really think about those identities regarding students, those intersectional identities, students that are international, students who are undocumented, returning and adult learners. How can we ensure that all students and their identities are included? And we'll kick this off question with Ruben. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to kick us off. So I do want to start answering this question by just full transparency, y'all. I am an ethnic studies alum of UC Berkeley. I think about systems. I think about transformative efforts. I'm trained in emergent strategies and healing justice and disability justice. So I take this question as like, how do we make sure that what we are going to put forth in the community is centering equity, is centering accessibility, and is thinking about the human experience of students as was putting this forth. So I wanted to lift two things, and I'm excited for also what Debbie's going to be lifting afterwards. Number one is I want to make sure that we prevent the rollout of these basic needs, resources, and support from being designed under a premise, either intentional or intentional, of being first come, first serve. First come, first serve will always privilege students that have the capacity to navigate complex institutions and have capacity to be on watch of when things go live and have a lot of abilities and privileges to make themselves first in line for first come, first serve. And when we think about basic needs and who are the students that are experiencing basic needs challenges, I want to lift our disabled community. I want to lift our BIPOC students. I want to lift our single parents. I want to lift our veterans. I want to lift our folks who have different abilities, mental, emotional, physical, across that spectrum, that they are out there experiencing basic needs challenges, not in the same ways, not being treated in the same manners, and consistently in perpetual survival mode. So the resources that we are going to put out there have to be centering them in the imagination of who needs us and how do we make sure that we support them proactively. So I want to start there to lift, like, how do we use technology to send personal, individualized outreach to them so that they get the first wave and that they get served. And then we kind of work our way from there. To give you a little bit of UC data, we know that at UC, on average, it's been around 39% of undergraduates experiencing food insecurity. But if you use the flags of first gen, low income, disabled, and queer, it goes from 39% to like over 80%. And we know that we can identify that population. And do not let people lie you in our institutions. If our billing and collections offices can identify students within a second of pressing on a button and they can send them nonstop communications until they pay whatever they owe billing and collections, we can also do that to take care of our communities. So I want to start with that. The second thing to share with you all is to please pace yourselves. Prioritize the organizing and the relationship building so that by the time that we roll out these interventions, they're relational, they were thought of intentionally with equity, with generative implications, taking care of the community so that we roll out and that we can emerge. Let's be iterative. We're gonna get things right. We're gonna get things wrong. We're gonna learn, we're gonna adapt, but it's very helpful to roll out if we're in right relationship with these same communities. Are students in the rooms that are discussing these dollars? Are students being asked what their ideas, what their suggestions, and what their priorities are? Or are we assuming what they need and we never actually checked in with the students about the best way of supporting them and taking care of them? So I just wanted to kick us off with those two offerings and happy to pass the mic over to Debbie.
Thank you so much, Ruben. Colleen, you're more than welcome to add on to this question.
So I'm going to jump in. This is Debbie with John Burton Advocates for Youth. And so I wanted to highlight a couple of things. One is that I wanted to emphasize what Dr. Crutchfield and Dr. Mcguire shared about providing services that are trauma informed, because I think that that's really crucial to ensuring equity. When we think about, the student population, these students have faced many times so many different things in their lives. It can include involvement in the foster care system, abuse or neglect by their families, witnessing violence, whether in their own home or in their communities, experiencing homelessness or severe poverty, being victims of crime, family estrangement. There's just a lot that students may be coming to these basic needs centers and with. And the way that trauma works is you experience trauma and it triggers this fight, flight, or freeze response. And then in a future situation that maybe isn't traumatic, it can reactivate that same response. Whereas with somebody who didn't have trauma, might not be activated in the same way. So, to just give a very simple example, if you're walking down a path and a snake jumps out and bites you and you have to go to the hospital and it takes weeks to recover. And then, somebody asks you to go on a hike a couple months later, you might be like, I'm never walking a path again. Or if you do, and, you see a stick across the road, you may turn tail and run as fast as you can. And other people might say, why is he running away from a stick? That's crazy. Well, similarly with somebody who's experienced trauma, they might be coming in to access services and their experience of trauma may make them distrustful of adults. Adults in their life may even have been harmful to them in the past. And so they might come across to the professional as avoidant or unresponsive or difficult or disorganized or missing appointments or argumentative, all of these things that might make a professional say, I don't want to serve this person. They're not being held accountable. They're not showing up for appointments or they're being too difficult. But being trauma informed means that we're all remembering, well, this response might not be a response to what's happening right now. This might be a response to something that happened years ago in this student's life. And I need to recognize that. And that's what it means to be trauma informed, is to expand how you're thinking about how you're working with students and really be not as focused on accountability and more focused on what might be going on behind the scenes or in this person's past that I need to be aware of and responsive to in how I'm interacting with these students to really give students who have faced the most difficult circumstances a real opportunity to have access to an education. So, I think bringing in training, as was suggested, is a really great idea because it's complicated. What does it really mean to be trauma informed? And so the more professionals can really truly understand what that means in a very practical way, the better. I just want to add one other point on a different note about being equitable. We in John Burton Advocates for Youth have done a lot of work recently about the issue of satisfactory academic progress for financial aid. and have discovered in a report that we did, which I'll put a link to in the chat, huge inequities in terms of who's losing financial aid because of this issue of satisfactory academic progress. So many students who show up seeking basic needs services are there because they lost their financial aid. And, you know, to Ruben's point, there obviously are federal requirements around that, but what we found is that institutions typically have much more flexibility than they allow themselves, whether because of a lack of understanding of federal policies or, you know, just outdated policies that haven't been changed, and really looking at these SAP policies and making them as expansive as possible within the context of federal guidance, I think can go a long way for ensuring equity. And so I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that report in the chat in case anybody's interested in learning more about what we discovered there.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for that amazing response and really centering on really approaching students holistically and not just their student identity, but really digging deeper and finding out what is happening within their circumstances to support them. It looks like our audience would truly like to know a little bit more about, you know, where private schools fit into this conversation. You know, do the same recommendations apply to them as well? Again, you know, if anyone would like to add into this conversation, please feel free to.
Vivian, I saw my good friend and colleague Colleen unmute herself, and so I'm wondering if we could invite her to help answer the previous question.
Thank you. And I was really just going to add on to something that Debbie said, and it's not quite as popular of a concept, but it's equally important to being trauma informed, and that's to being poverty informed. And that a lot of folks who have experienced generational poverty, they have imprints that impact how they access resources, and they have developed some mechanisms of survival themselves. And so when you think about families who have experienced generational poverty, you know, many are living hand to mouth and have for, you know, decades. And so this is just what they've learned about survival. And so when we're interfacing with students who have experienced trauma or who have experienced sort of cyclical poverty, I think if we're able to put those lenses on and, you know, maybe remove our middle or lower middle class or upper class glasses and just think about someone who is really struggling just to eat, someone who is really struggling just to feed their children, and put those glasses on. And I know folks do, so I'm not suggesting that they don't, but it's just a reminder that people who have been in cyclical poverty bring to bear some mechanisms of survival that will also could possibly look foreign to folks at the campuses.
Thank you so much, Colleen, for adding in that feedback. And thank you so much, Anak, for catching that for me. Appreciate that. And looking at our Q&A, it seems that Dr. Crutchfield is answering that private college question. So I'll let her go ahead and take that lead in the Q&A, but we'll continue with our guided questions. And it seems, you know, we'll move on to the next one. What programmatic areas must colleges consider allocating their spending to create a foundational support for students' basic needs? Colleen, would you like to start us off and maybe highlight some of those models?
Sure. Absolutely, glad to do so. First, I just want to take a minute to thank Dr. Crutchfield and Dr. Mcguire for assembling such an incredible resource for all of the public colleges in the state. It's very encouraging to have reviewed the document and to know that so many of the California community colleges are already employing many of the recommendations outlined in the research document, but it's really helpful to have it all in one place and to sort of take it in as a package of recommendations. So thank you both for working on that and putting that together and making it available to all of us. In terms of foundational support, fortunately for the California community college system, we had some pretty prescriptive legislative language to drive the development of our basic needs centers across our system. In addition to the basic needs center funding, we also received some designated funds to support the provision of mental health services for our students. And both of those funding streams are ongoing, and relatively speaking, they're fairly significant. I think fundamentally, when we're talking about student success and basic need insecurities, we need to look at the whole student. You know, we're in the process of really reframing how we think about basic needs and financial aid, and really move away from the siloed approach of the work and really think about how do we look at all of the social determinants of education, and how do we look at the whole student and institutionalize these kind of services rather than have them be marginal services on the side. I think to Ruben's point earlier, we need to recognize the needs of parenting students and students who have experienced homelessness, students who've been in foster care or juvenile justice system, students of color, students who historically are underrepresented in higher education. And we need to be in a position to support them when they arrive in a meaningful way that really addresses, you know, these fundamental needs, because they're not going to be successful without them. So we, you know, fortunately have sort of a universe of people that we get to work with and learn from in terms of implementing best practices and implementing practices that align with interventions that are proven by data. And so a little bit later, I think I'm going to talk about some of our data processes that we're implementing, but I think it's important that we, again, to Ruben's point, not rush. You know, I think we know that students have needs, but to be thoughtful about what kind of interventions we want to implement, to whom, and at what rate, and do all of this in coordination with the other programs on campus. I think the challenge is that so often programs, categorical programs, you know, specially funded programs tend to operate in silos. And this is really an opportunity, because the basic needs funding and the mental health services funding, neither of those have strict eligibility criteria, or really any eligibility criteria established in the statutory language, which gives colleges flexibility to really look at their data and identify who are the students who are in most need. How are we going to coordinate that effort with our financial aid offices to really maximize their total cost of attendance? And so, yeah, I think I'll take a pause there and let others respond to the question as well.
Thank you so much, Colleen. And Nas, would you like to add on to this question?
Yeah, thank you. Adding to what Colleen was just sharing, the flexibility that we have been provided in the legislative language is such a beautiful thing, right? The notion that all of our campuses have the flexibility and freedom to address their unique student needs is incredible. As Colleen was sharing about ensuring that we are meeting the needs of our students, it's important that we audit the student experience, right? How are we supporting our basic needs and secure students who are transferring in from our local community college, from our local feeder high schools? How are we ensuring that that there's a seamless handshake and that there's a continuity of services when students are coming onto our campuses, whatever campus or system they are enrolling into? Upon enrolling and going to orientation, registering for classes, navigating the college experience from application to graduation, what are the barriers, what are the challenges that students are experiencing basic needs and securities, and how do we ensure that we are reaching them where they are? As Ruben indicated, not every student is going to respond to an email. Not every student is going to be a subscriber to your Instagram or your Twitter, right? They're not going to know when things are becoming available. And so we have to ensure that as we're working on developing our core programs and services that are not on the fringe of the campus environment, but are integrated as part of the campus DNA, that we are doing the best to include the student voice to help inform our practice. So as we talk through the basic needs task forces or work groups that are responsible for building up and ensuring that this work is part of the campus DNA, we need to include the student voice in that, right? That is very, very important. I think too, fundamentally, the funds that we have been provided recurring for the first time in the CSU and the community college system are meant to fundamentally support basic needs, right? It is food, it is housing, it is expanding EBT and the restaurant meals program. We need to ensure that we're doing what we have been charged to do, right? At the end of this, there will be legislative reports, and we have to be very, very mindful of using these funds for the intended purpose as the legislature has asked us to do.
Thank you so much, Enoch, for elaborating on that and really being intentional in really pushing our campuses to find ways to centralize basic needs and make it accessible to those students who are enrolled and matriculated. I think it's really important, and let's go ahead and discuss a little further about this. So what are some prominent models and opportunities for collaboration in developing responses to students' basic needs? Debbie, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I was just going to speak very specifically to the issue of housing, which is, I think, probably the, if not the most challenging issues around basic needs when you have students who are homeless. And I would really encourage campuses who don't already have partnerships in place with local community-based homelessness service providers to seek these out and try to create these kinds of collaborations. For the community colleges, there's actually some language in the funding that just passed that requires connections to the continuums of care, the homeless service continuums of care. But in addition, there's the community colleges are receiving, in addition to the ongoing funds to create basic needs centers, an additional $100 million in one-time funding that could be used to create partnerships with housing providers, similar to what state funding is used for at some community colleges and CSUs for rapid rehousing programs, where there's relationships between the college and the housing provider to be able to identify housing and provide things like housing navigation services. And I think that housing is such a complicated issue that I would encourage campuses to not necessarily try to become experts in things like housing navigation, rapid rehousing, housing subsidies. There are partners in the community who've been doing that work for years, who have relationships with landlords and can administer those kinds of programs. And creating those kinds of partnerships and actually sub-granting money from your allocation to housing providers to assist with some of that work, I think is a really powerful strategy and a very important strategy for campuses to consider when they're thinking about partnerships.
I want to elaborate a little on the program that Debbie alluded to. So in the CSU, this is what we call the College Focused Rapid Rehousing Program, currently being piloted on 8 of our campuses, where the campuses work with continuum of care agencies or organizations that have a long history of supporting students who are housing insecure with providing full wraparound support and services, right? So a student may come to Cal State Long Beach, for example, since we're so well represented on this call from Cal State Long Beach, come to the staff there and indicate I'm housing insecure. The staff is able to place the student in emergency temporary housing in the on-campus housing facilities, while the agency, Hoveness Inc., searches for a more permanent solution where that student can go and live for the duration of their academic journey, for the duration that they are in need of this level of support. And this program, this model, is something that exists at the other 2 segments as well. We call it a little differently, again, beauty and flexibility of naming things and doing things, but it has taken a significant amount of lifting from the campuses, from our staff members to do this work, right? It is no easy thing to establish and sustain relationships, to learn the cultures of other organizations outside of our college environment. And so these are things that with intentional thought, with perseverance, can be established. And when the end goal is to support our students and to ensure that there is equity in the ways that we are supporting them and providing an educational experience to them, all things are possible, right? It may take a little while, but all things are possible when the ultimate goal is a really good, positive goal.
Thank you so much, Enoch and Debbie, for really expanding on this topic and adding those valid points. Would anyone else like to expand on this specific question before we move on?
Just one small note that I've noticed as a result of COVID is that a lot of the California community college campuses, and this could very well be the case in both of the other segments, have really, as a result of COVID initially, but even now as we go back to hybrid, some in-person, have created fully digital processes for students to access basic needs services and other services that they need to be successful. And so I think, I think that even when we go back to full in-person, if that becomes the reality of the situation, I think making the process for students to access services as student-friendly and as student-oriented, like the way that students would access services, right? To require that they go in and fill out 4 paper forms and all of those processes, a lot of times that's an outdated method, and students now are so tech savvy. And so I'm really happy to see that, I can request a full suite of services and be evaluated within 24 to 30 hours of what I need and be referred to the appropriate services. So it's just something to keep in mind, is the automation of the requests and how helpful ultimately that is for today's students to be able to access services like in that manner.
Thank you so much, Colleen.
I'm just going to chime in real quick because there's been a few questions that have come in about what I've said. So I did answer a couple of the questions in the chat with links to resources about how to find your continuums of care and that kind of thing. So feel free to look, or not in the chat, rather than the Q&A. So feel free to look in the Q&A for that information. And then I see a question in here about what do we mean by subgrant money to community partners? What I mean by that is, let's say you get your share of that one-time $100 million. You go out and you work with a community-based housing provider and you say, we're going to give you money that you're going to use to hire a staff person to help our students find housing. And then you're going to use some of that money to also work with those landlords to pay part of their rent for 6 months until they get on their feet. And so you are actually giving them money from what you're getting to administer a program such as that, rather than trying to do that work yourself.
Great, thank you so much, Debbie, for that point on that topic. We'll go ahead and move on to another question. For this one, it would be great to kind of speak on maybe a little bit better what our state leaders and colleges can do to better document practices that make the biggest difference for our students. We were talking a little bit about the evaluation, but what are some other practices that could really work to better document the practices that leaders are going to be doing to make the biggest difference for our students?
So I think I'll get us started on this one. In terms of documenting effective practices, our entire system is really on, is in the arena of really wanting to implement a practice, look at the data, determine if the intended outcome happened, and then revisit the practice if the intended outcome didn't happen. For us, the California Community College System, we're going to be employing some new data processes that will assist our office and also individual colleges recognize how their practices and their basic needs services specifically are impacting student success and impacting student outcomes. For the recently distributed Basic Needs Center funding, we're going to be developing a new data element within our management information system. The new data element will allow us to match the provision of basic needs services to students' educational outcomes. This is a data function that many of our long-time categorically funded programs have this data function, though it will be new for our basic needs services. So that's an important change that will be happening for the California community colleges to be able to directly link, the level of service and the type of service specifically with the student and the outcome. For our rapid rehousing pilot program, all 3 segments got funds for a rapid rehousing pilot program. We're piloting that program at 14 of our community colleges, designed to support students who are homeless or at significant risk of becoming homeless. We've created a distinct web-based reporting portal. So it's only at 14 campuses. It's a pilot program. So it didn't make sense to create a data element within our overall system management information system. So what we did was we developed a web-based portal. It allows colleges to upload student information about the services that they received, both about the volume of services and any direct aid that they received as part of their participation in the pilot program. As a result, we'll be able to, again, match the volume and types of services with the student outcomes. And colleges locally will be able to do this as well. Ideally, we'll be able to see correlations between the level and types of services and the outcomes. And by evaluating the data, we're hoping to identify that tipping point of the specific types of services and the volume of services that really seem to be making a difference for students' educational outcomes. So I'll stop talking there and let someone else join, but I am really excited to report those changes specifically around basic needs oriented services for the California community colleges.
Thanks, Colleen. I think I'll expand by just emphasizing the importance of partnership with our faculty members on our campuses, right? Folks who have an interest and have been doing this work for a number of years. It is important now more than ever to ensure that those partnerships continue to be formalized, sustained, because there will come a time where the segments have to report to the legislature the impact of these resources, of our expanded programs and services to student success. Right? It's important to work with your faculty. It's important to work with your Office of Institutional Research, looking clearly at our student demographics and how students are being supported and the impact that is making. And that's, again, why it's so important to ensure that the resources, the funds are used in the manner that we have in charge to use them.
I feel like I would be remiss if I also didn't mention actually talking to students.
Right.
So it's great to collect data and to look at outcomes. And I realize that all sounded very sterile when I was talking about that. But for us, it's an important measure. But talking to the students and finding out what they need and finding out the types of interventions that would be most useful. And I think the students have led a lot of the charge here. And have really mandated that people listen to what their needs are. And all of these needs have been so significantly compounded by the COVID crisis that I think the data piece is important, but I also think hearing real time from students. I know our research department is just about to launch a qualitative study with students. And so it will be very specifically around these kind of services. And I think that it will be equally as helpful to hear from them as it is to look at data. Again, data is very important, but I think it's really important to know if your intervention, what you think from, wherever you are in the socioeconomic stature, right? If it's the same kind of intervention that a student really needs and really wants. And so it's just, I felt like it was important to bring that to bear.
And Ruben, you really do come at the perfect time because we're shifting over to some Q&A. Let's have you elaborate. And then I actually have a Q&A question directed to you after, if you want to add on to anything.
Yeah, I wanted to just name this just to state the obvious, because sometimes we don't state the obvious because there's different kinds of obviouses that we have access to. But I did want to share with folks, maybe for the folks that are right now listening and you're starting to feel a somatic experience of like overwhelm, and you're like, whoa, there's a lot going on. I don't even know where to get started. it's very important for us to pace ourselves to make sure that first and foremost, that folks on your campus are connected. That's one of the biggest barriers, that when it comes to basic needs, there's a lot of isolated pockets of folks that are doing sometimes the exact same things or very different things. But let's make sure that on your campus that there's a trusted circle of folks that are having these conversations, and that everybody gets on the same page of what is actually going on in the different areas of your campus. And that you ask ourselves questions of like, what do we already know that we need to do better that these resources can support? And what are some of the things that we need to stop? And we just need to stop them because they're not actually not helpful, right? Like just start like there, and then tap into some of the things that luckily have been incredibly established. Like one example that comes to mind that I already know is functioning at different campuses, and they're actually all over the country, is our Swipe Out Hunger team with Rachel and the family out there who have dedicated themselves to this effort, have found a way that can operationalize an intervention in different college campuses, have tools, have guides, have all these kinds of resources. Seek out folks who have been doing great work if your campus hasn't been doing that, because oftentimes folks are energized when they get some victories, some wins. It becomes real for them. So just want to also make sure that we make space and capacity for that. And then the last thing, and then happy to pass you the mic, Vivian, for the question that has come up. I do want to encourage you all to say that I do want to give a shout out to the folks who have been doing this work for a long time or for a little bit of time and have felt a sense of no one cares about this. I'm alone in this. It's almost like I've been crying wolf while the wolf is already biting my leg. You know, like there's a lot of that sense of overwhelm. And if we haven't prioritized our healing, if we're not taking care of ourselves in this moment where there's resources and where there is money, there's going to be drama. That we may be showing up to those environments with some cynicism or some unhealthiness or some unhealthy dynamics. And I do want to celebrate you on a formula. Thank y'all so much for being believers before this money came about. And bring your wisdom, bring your great energy into those conversations and hold folks generatively accountable. It's okay to say, hey, we've been doing this and we have a lot to offer. Don't just tell us what to do now because you have this fancy letter and money, because we have the relationships, we have the possibilities. Let's do it together, but let's be open to possibilities. Let's be open to collaborating with each other and doing things together as we learn from different campuses, as we learn from different community projects and efforts like Swap Out Hunger and others. And let's bring folks together. Let's call in, let's organize, let's take care of each other. And let's make sure that basic needs efforts make us feel healthy and that it's part of building the world that we know that our communities deserve. Because that kind of healing and treatment and relationships is what justice is about. It's not always about fighting and protest and dissent. It's also about generative relationships and healing blockages of the past. So I just wanted to name that in this space for whoever that feels like medicine and affirmation to. But Vivian, go ahead. Happy to answer the question that you have.
Thank you so much, Ruben. Give me 1 second. The chat is going off, which makes me so excited that our community is so engaged and truly wants to know these responses. If you could please, Ruben, elaborate from my understanding on recommendation number 4 from Rashida and Dr. Mcguire, Dr. Kutcher and Dr. Mcguire, which expands on strengthening relationships with community-based partners and other colleges. Specifically, the question is seeking to ask, I'm so sorry, this chat is going off, which is so helpful, but I'm trying to get to this question. Okay, Ruben, the participant is asking, I feel like the CCs and the CSUs are really doing a much better job with developing partnerships and county representatives, local housing authorities, mental health providers, community action agencies, K through 12 districts. The UCs seem very solid. However, is that because most legislation is more like a recommendation than a mandate?
Yeah. This is where I always get in trouble. And for all my UC administrators that are in here, you know, just come at me outside afterwards because you're about to get really upset. The reason why the CCC and the CSU has an infrastructure and has relationships with the community is because the representation of the CCC and CSU has historically been a lot more hyper-localized and representative of those communities. The UC system has historically had this like elitism to itself and has a much higher representation of out-of-state and international students than localized students that are reflective of their communities. That's the presumption of it, which is a project. It's a political ideological project because it invisibilizes all of us. I am a product of the UC, but I know that through UC, I was broke as broke can be. And you don't tell the stories of the low-income students moving through the UC because it's invisibilized. It's about the elitism and the 1% and the best and the brightest. And folks forget that the best and the brightest come from all socioeconomic statuses and all intersectional identities. So that's something that we're slowly transitioning towards as many of us are starting to come into these positions of influence and have access to organizing and mobilizing, that we're able to bring some humility to the UC system and bring some agency into acknowledging the fact that just because we are elite does not mean that we are broke, and that there's low income communities in aggregate mass in the UC system. Where do we think all these community college students that transfer into the UC, do you think we make them rich because they came to the UC? Hell no. Our financial aid system is broken. Nobody becomes rich when you're low income by coming into the UC by default. Low income students that were in community college that come into the UC stay low income and oftentimes are transferring into universities with much more expensive cost of living in the areas. So it's a double negative. So I do want to just name that and acknowledge that, and also celebrate the fact that administration and leadership in the UC is finally starting to change. We have the most amount of women in leadership, the most amount of BIPOC folks, the most amount of first generation folks. All of my bosses are either women, people of color, first gen students, or all of the above. That's who my new bosses are. So everything is starting to change in the UC system in a transformative direction. So I just want to name that for folks. I love the question and the invitation for us to continue moving in that direction. And also, y'all, don't get it twisted. Don't let them lie to you all. We're causing some shit in the UC. We're bringing a lot of revolutionary energy, and a lot of the organizing that you're seeing in this space. Enoch is my brother. Colleen is my sister. Like Rashida and Jen, like we homies. We behind the scenes, like organizing and moving things across the different segments to move about a transformative change that brings the higher education community together and organizes a collective powerful force. That's why we're passing these bills, getting these budget items. And I don't know how many of y'all heard, but we're getting ready to go to the National White House Conference to end hunger, and college students are going to be a priority population in that effort. It's a whole transformative generation that we're super grateful to be doing things together as a family in a village, and that we have incredible advocates like Debbie, like the Rachels of the world, who are not within higher education, and they can talk that shit and say whatever they want. And we're like, oh, we didn't say that. Debbie said it. Rachel said it. Look at this data. Look at these reports. And we're making things happen across. This is what our previous generations and ancestors have been dreaming of, for us to bring that organizing, cultural, systemic, transformative power. And that's who we are. I hope that answered that question.
It sure did, and brought so much transparency. Thank you so much, Ruben, for doing that for us. I would like to go ahead and continue with our audience questions to make sure that they also have that, voice in this space. So this is going to go specifically to Debbie. If I could chime you in on this specifically, since you were talking about homelessness, housing insecurity. So it's a quoted question from the audience. So prior to the pandemic, I worked at Cal State LA, where more than 100 dorm rooms sat empty. When just a few miles away, a East Los Angeles community college, 1 in 5 of their students were experiencing homelessness. I have been lobbying CSU campuses to partner with community-based nonprofits like mine to reimagine the use of their vacant dorm rooms. Our nonprofit offered to pay market rate for those empty dorm rooms so that they could house and support students from nearby community colleges. So far, CSU campuses have been a bit reluctant in reimagining community partnerships like these. It still continues. Would you all recommend legislation or executive orders from the Chancellor's office that facilitates partnerships between the CSU, community colleges, and community-based organizations for the purpose of providing housing and support for students beyond the 14 to 30 days that most campuses with dorm programs are offering to students struggling with stable housing? Should we look into exploring this? Sorry, that was a long question.
You know what, I'll say one quick thing on this, but then I'm going to redirect this question over to Enoch, because I think this is really for the CSU system. But I will just note that in this year's budget, there was a substantial amount of funding made available for all three systems to build new dorms for low-income students. And one of the kind of priority criteria that would get somebody more points in that process is collaborations across the systems. So there was a little bit of work kind of put into trying to support, at least for future student housing, to incentivize collaboration across the systems and make those dorms available to multiple systems. But I think I'm going to direct it over to Enoch to speak more broadly to the question.
Thank you, Debbie. And I know Sam very well from my time at Cal State LA. And I thank you, Sam, for the question. At the foundation of this question is what the governor's office is currently considering right now. The governor's office has convened representatives from each of the three segments, as well as from the private schools, to help us define basic needs for all California college students, as well as to identify the core programs and services that any student can expect from any campus that they are attending. And so this call to action for additional partnerships and working not only with the local schools in the area, local community colleges or local colleges in the area, but also nonprofits to expand our reach and expand our programs and services is something that is being heavily discussed right now. The governor's office will be fulfilling or releasing their set of recommendations for the three segments and the private schools in January. So we are a few weeks away from that happening. And I would hope that once that is released and once that is established, that we would see more elected officials prioritizing this and introducing legislative bills and language that will help our campuses do this. So what you've just shared, Sam, you are not alone. It is on the minds of lots of people, and I'm really happy to see it currently being discussed at the highest office in our state.
Can I add to that really quickly? So I do wanna take on what Debbie shared earlier, y'all. Like, do not let our campus folks provide dismissive responses when you ask questions of, is this possible? And if they say, no, we can't do that. Like, for example, there's 100 beds empty and we know that there's houseless students, and you go and you ask, can we put these students there? And they're like, no, we can't. Can you help me understand why not? Well, because of policy. Can you show me the policy? And let's review the policy together so that we can understand the policy and that we can have folks who are the policy representatives of the campus let us know if the policy actually says what the interpretation that has been operating on the campus is accurate. Because I've also been in a lot of spaces where that kind of follow-up and consistency and confirmation hasn't been provided. And that is also highly problematic. It's problematic because to dismiss a direct request of an available resource where there are students that we know of that need that is the definition of privilege and oppression in operation. And if we don't intervene in those moments, then we become co-conspirators with that said oppression in and of itself. And we need to raise awareness and consciousness. There are some fundamental things that don't make sense in this current university model. And none of us built this. So why are we making ourselves so personally vulnerable to defend something that we didn't build and that is not working for our communities? So I want to give agency and encourage our communities to ask those questions, make sure that we're clear, make sure that the interpretation of these policies are accurate. And when you're trying to do the right thing and there's a policy in the way, lift that. Ask the question to see if I'm in the CCC, hey, Colleen, can we get some help? Like, is this the same policy interpretation in all campuses or just us? Because that's helpful for us. It's helpful for our conversations. Hey, Enoch, is this the policy interpretation? Because at Long Beach, they're saying, yes, we can do a safe parking program, but then right next door, they're telling us no. So is it yes or is it no? How do we move towards yes? Because students are suffering out there and we need more yeses to make sure that our students are being taken care of, because we're talking about our future educators, doctors, lawyers, community shapers, service agents that are going to be taking care of us and the future generations. That's what's at stake. So I do want to empower us and to have those conversations, and y'all always with curiosity, always with good energy, always with generative approach. Everything doesn't have to be so like combative and like draining. Let's bring some joy and pleasure into these conversations and always remind folks that we're trying to figure out how to take better care of our communities. And the better care that we take care of them, the better care they're going to take care of us and others in the future. So let's start moving in that direction, because it can't just be dismissive as like, we can't do it and there's no way to do it. Because all of those no's have been historically harmful and they're scaling as things are getting more expensive and financial aid isn't keeping up with how expensive things are getting.
And I'll just add one quick note to what Ruben said, which is, you know, if you, first of all, thank you, Ruben, absolutely. Ditto all of that. And if you do that work and go through that process and discover that, yes, in fact, there is something in law that makes something, you know, impossible to do, remember that law can be changed. And so we at John Burton Advocates for Youth, that's what we do, has been noted on this call. We are the advocates and we will sponsor bills and we will get laws changed. So if the law is a barrier, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always looking for new ideas for policy, and we're happy to have that conversation and see, hey, maybe this is a bill we can sponsor. Let's get this actually changed in law so that we can make it work.
I also want to second Ruben's sentiment and also just call out, you know, in the California community college system, we are a relatively decentralized system and districts have a lot of autonomy. And so there's always a balance between, you know, local policy and what we think should happen at the state. So I just want to point that out. We're very decentralized. We have 116 colleges, and it's a challenge to navigate, right? I mean, I think it's okay to call it out that can be challenging to navigate local policy. And so I also would second the motion of asking, don't assume, you know, ask, you know, is this in statute? You know, is there something that really prohibits us? And to start from that platform, rather than just accepting the no, or, you know, I think making your requests in the best interest of students. If we all launch from that place, and we really have the student at the core of everything that we're doing, and I get a little squishy, right at the core and in our heart of what we're trying to accomplish, and a no comes, then there's something there to work through, right? There's some raw material to work through to say, hey, should we get this changed? Is it a local policy? Is it a state policy? Is it a federal policy? I mean, there's all kinds of federal policies around CalFresh that are so antiquated and so painful and so unfair that you know, and so it's just, I would just say, when you hear a no, go to the person who's giving you the no and say, look, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. And can we talk about where is it in statute, is in state statute, is in federal statute, is a local policy? And if it is, what can we do about it and why is it there? Because sometimes there's a reason why it's there, right? So it's not always a good reason, but nonetheless, it's worth having a positive facing, student facing conversation about it.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, Enoch, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to really quickly say that we acknowledge that the systems are not perfect, and there are many broken things that we are all operating and working with. Working at the system office, I understand where some of these broken pieces are, and we do our best of ensuring that the folks and the powers that are acknowledge these and are able to help us fix them. But fundamentally, when we're talking about our changing demographic student body, so too should our policies and practices evolve as well, right? So we are right there with you, and as you learn of challenges that you are experiencing as you are supporting students, please let us know. Please let us be your voice at the tables that we sit at. And that's exactly what I've been trying to do, sitting on the governor's office and representing my colleagues in Chebna and representing the research that we are receiving from many folks who are doing research on students' basic needs, as well as the practices of our partners, such as the folks at JBay. So we are here to listen to you. And as Ruben was sharing, we thank you for all the hard work that you do in meeting with students and doing your very best in meeting their needs. So thank you for always doing that.
Thank you so much, all of the panelists, the audience, for all of these amazing questions. I am honored to have been the moderator for this discussion. I now want to hand it off, for the interest of time, to Miguel Leon for closing remarks.
Thank you, Vivian. Absolutely amazing job moderating our panel today. Thank you to our panelists for your participation and your ongoing support of students, family, everyone in the audience. If you can join me in a collective virtual applause for everybody on the panel. Yeah, absolutely powerful. I think we could go on for another 2-3 hours for sure with this conversation. Just a reminder, good policy is followed by good implementation. So whether you're a campus leader, a student, an ally, or an advocate, we all play a role in maximizing California's investment in helping students meet their basic needs. As you heard today, let's avoid quick fixes and short-term solutions. Let's avoid recreating ineffective systems filled with red tape that target the wrong students or that force students to perform their poverty and don't see them as humans first. Together, we can turn the corner on the basic needs crisis. Transforming basic needs supports in California higher education was brought to you today by the Michelson 20mm Foundation and by the Center for Equitable Higher Education. If you'd like to learn more about our foundation's work, visit 20mm.org or email me at miguel@20mm.org. If you'd like to learn more about the Center for Equitable Higher Education, you can email Dr. Rashida Crutchfield at rashida.crutchfield@csulb.edu or Dr. Jen Mcguire at jennifer.mcguire@humboldt.edu. You'll find a recording of today's conversation on our YouTube channel, the Michelson 20mm Foundation, by the end of this week. Thank you again for joining us today. Much appreciated. Have a great rest of the day. Thank
This
you.
whole thing was recorded?
Yes, it was.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That's why you get in trouble, brother.
Now you're gonna have to step outside for real.
Let me know any available jobs, y'all. This might be it. This is my way going out. Yeah, appreciate y'all. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, everybody.